Aloha mai kako. Hello, everyone. I hope you are excited to join in on a conversation today. I'm really excited to be moderating a discussion panel, or I guess an interactive, more talk story session with Dr. Erynne Gilpin and also professional skier Connor Ryan. Hopefully, everyone was able to check out the sessions that we had talking about outdoor adventure through a native lens. And now's an opportunity for anyone who wants to kind of discuss what we were talking about. Feel free to chat in the chat box with any questions. And also, we can bring you on if you want to do a video conversation as well. So, aloha, Connor. Erynne. Maybe.
What's up, UATê? Good to see you.
Same.
Hey.
But yeah, I guess to just kick things off, maybe I'll just start it off until the questions kind of start coming through. When we were talking about our nativeness, I guess, when we go out to the outdoors and adventure, maybe just since our conversation, it was a pre-recorded conversation, what are some things that you've been doing, Connor, and did you implement any little protocols here or there when you're out in the big mountains? It seems like it's been dumping out in the continent.
Yeah, it's been amazing lately. It's good to see winter finally coming through. We were off to a slow start there for a while. But yeah, I've been on the road, and one of the things that I've really been thinking about is I had the opportunity to ski with a Lakota ski patroller up in Montana, and he was telling me about how long it took him, that he lived in the town where the ski area was, before he thought, he could be a skier as a native person. And then within 3 years of becoming a skier, now he's on ski patrol at that mountain. And for me, that's just something that's been kind of really inspiring me on that kind of permission to connect idea that was kind of underlying all of what we're talking about. Is just like, the land is the land, and that's like an unchanging thing. And the sea is the same way, I think, where it's like, it's always going to be there. It's a constant in our lives. And what the barriers are to our access, can change so quick once we change our mindsets about where we belong. And so that's something that's had me really stoked up lately.
And Erynne, have you been getting out? Have you been hiding in the warmth of the cabin?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're definitely not in our climbing season, but we're really excited. We're starting to feel the seasons change. So we've just been really kind of like doing our indoor stuff in terms of climbing. I'm also I'm also 7 months pregnant. So like climbing for me is a whole different experience. It's been really fun climbing with a new body every day. So I've been actually reflecting a lot about some of the things that we spoke about in our previous conversation, really about kind of, understanding kinship to land and things like that. I'm learning in a very different way right now, in ways that perhaps I didn't realize I didn't know. I think I thought I knew a lot of things, but I'm definitely having a whole new insight to that. So as the weather changes and we get to kind of touch some real rock, I'm really excited to see what that will be like, and to see also what climbing will kind of what type of spaces we'll be able to access as a family as well. So that's really exciting. But I have to say, the thing that's been just in my head since our conversation was when Connor, you were talking really a lot about, you made this connection for me that was just so mind-blowing, and it was really around understanding how, like, the snow that you I was going to say carve on. I don't know the words that you talk about.
Yeah.
Snow that you surf, right? Like it's the water that you drink, and making those connections around the ideas around like protecting the sacred, and expanding how we think about snow, water, land, all of these different things as kind of more one of the same shifting bodies. And that was a conversation that I had with my family afterwards. I was telling Cliff, like, in our language, we have over 100 words for snow. And which is, that tells you that we're from some snowy places. But I mean, you really shifted kind of how I think about that as well, in terms of your, think about responsibilities to snow and to water. So that's definitely resounded with me. But yeah.
Sweet.
That's on top of all of that, I'm excited to see the new addition to the family come and apply some of those perspectives. And I'm wondering too, if baby's going to be more of a skier, surfer, or a climber.
Let's see.
Yeah, I just had some friends come over to the Big Island where I'm from, and we were able to kind of look at the new waves that are being formed over there by lava. And it was interesting to kind of, it was with a big shoe brand, and it was trying to find the right way to share the experiences without appropriating any of the community culture that exists there, and be sensitive to those spaces. So even me, just since our conversation, it's been nice to kind of have some solidarity in thinking about how we can improve our marketabilities across different platforms. But to kick things off with some questions, we have Gianluca. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But it's a question about how do we find balance in our careers, whether we're in the mountain or we're in the ocean. And for me, balancing a life of professional surfing while also contributing to the scientific community, it's not something that's really widely, I feel, understood, especially in the surf industry. But within the surfing industry, there's a lot of professional surfers who are artists, or they're musicians, or they have something that they're surfing and then they go out and they do something more artistic. And for me, that's kind of my artistic outlet outside of like both of them have cultural significance, but the artistic side of looking at molecules and trying to understand the language of the earth and between each other through chemical language, I think is just helps me to get creative. That's just me. Maybe Erynne and Connor, if you would like to share about how do you effectively contribute, whether it's through engaging women in rock climbing, Indigenous people in rock climbing, marginalized communities in rock climbing, and also other Native people in snow. How do you folks do the work, but also maintain that level of proficiency in your craft or your expression?
Go for it, Connor.
Yeah, I'd say for me, like, it's kind of like I couldn't do one without the other. And I think that's the biggest thing for me consistently is like, for today, for example, like it snowed 11 inches at the local mountain. And so like I rushed up there, I caught 3 laps, and then I came down and jumped on this. And on one hand, sometimes like that kind of rush can feel like, oh, like maybe I'm putting too much on myself. But usually when I think about like my interactions with the land, it usually builds me up in such a way that helps remind me of like, why am I doing this? Like it's so much easier to come into a space and speak as, you know, an activist or whatever it might be. After I'm like full, after my cup is full, you know, from having that experience with the land, from being with the water in that way, like it's so much easier to speak on it when it's fresh and it's right there for me. And so for me, I think like the balance kind of derives itself once I find that thing that I'm passionate about. Because that's the other thing is like I leave the mountain all fired up and all stoked up at the end of the day, and like I got to do something with that energy. And so for me, I think it's kind of like this cyclical thing. And as long as I remember, you know, both parts of that circle, it usually kind of balances itself out.
Totally. I really relate to that. I think as well, you know, for myself, when I found climbing, it became a real place for me to kind of explore, you know, who I am. And it was a real place of reflection, but in my body. And it became a real practice, I think, of kind of like self-care. Like climbing's really wrapped up with my well-being and my wellness and how I feel as a woman, how I understand strength, just kind of like my own relationship with body, but also relationship with land. And so it became apparent again and again, the more I would get into climbing, how the climbing community wasn't necessarily reflective of our cultural communities. And there was these huge schisms between kind of like what was perceived to be some like cultural norms and worldviews. You know, we would often encounter systemic racism at the Craig, or, you know, misogyny and sexism in terms of route names and things like that. And so when I started to meet more Indigenous, specifically women climbers, we were able to kind of hold spaces for this and for allow ourselves to be fully, you know, mixed and Indigenous peoples. And as a climber, we didn't have to kind of divorce our identities within those spaces, especially as women within climbing, which is a whole other thing as well. And so, I mean, totally what Connor is saying, like, it's completely interconnected. And, you know, for a lot of us too, we don't really get the choice to be able to say, you know, this is work, these are our values. We are responsible to communities. We are responsible. We actually have natural laws that hold us accountable to our governance systems and our teachings that bind us to place, that bind us to one another, and bind us to the accountability for future generations. And so those are really non-negotiables. And so we have to, I think it just naturally is infused with whatever our craft may be, whether it's climbing, skiing, music, and otherwise. It's kind of like as natural as breathing in some ways, which I'll add some more levels, you know, as well. We, you know, while we're able to, like, while I can go out and climb and just like be there and be present, you know, we also have different types of, I think, like boundaries and things to negotiate, which just adds some new dynamics for us as well too.
Creativity. I think that's really in the mix of everything. If you're creative, it seems natural. If you're one-dimensional, then maybe it seems like, how does it all connect? So awesome. For anyone who's listening inside of this conversation, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat, or you can come in and try to ask a question face to face. But a question that just came in the chat from Lisbeth, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, are how can we support and empower communities, Native, Brown, low-income people who also almost bear sole the brunt of environmental justice. And, you know, before I think we open that up, I would hope that we don't focus too much on the negative and the guilt of what has happened, and we acknowledge it, but don't focus on it, and that we start to look for these solutions. I think personally for me, that's the best way to move forward, is not dwell on the past, not make like it didn't happen, but at the same point, understand that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in pushing forward. And maybe Connor and Erynne, you could maybe share what you folks think is some of that work that we can begin, maybe on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I'll start that one off. I think like one of the biggest things is like, it's really about listening and changing the narrative. Something that happened to me today was I was in line and someone cut me in line, and like, waiting for the line for the ski lift on a powder day is probably like waiting for like waves in the lineup lift, you know what I mean? And like, so this person cut me, and I was like, well, that's not how the line works. Like, this says alternate, so like we should go every other. And the two people, they persisted to cut ahead of me, and their reason was, no, we know what we're doing. We've been here, we've been going here way longer than you, which I just thought was really funny as like an Indigenous person who's like 50 miles from my like traditional homeland, ends at the border of the mountains there. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, if you're going to carry that kind of attitude into stuff, then like expand it. Because maybe you've been skiing at this ski resort for 30 years, but like my people have been here for thousands of years. Like, what do you mean you've been here longer, you can cut me in line? Like, and I think a lot of that happens like culturally and in a more widespread way. And so I think when it comes to these solutions, like, it's really about listening to folks, Indigenous people in particular, about the length of our experience in these places. And when it comes to like making change, when it comes to climate change, and when it comes to restructuring like how an inclusive community works, we have a really good framework for that. And we just need to be heard on how that works. Like, so many of our peoples come from this Matakuyasin, this all my relations kind of way of viewing the world. And when I see the world as all my relations, like, that's white people, that's black people, that's Indigenous people, that's people that aren't people, people with 4 legs, people that are trees, like all that. And so I think just considering that, like, our mindset is going to sound different to you at first, but there's a lot of ingrained solutions in there that work really well. And if we're going to create a collective story together, it really does have to kind of exit this like singularly dominant kind of timeline that we've been on and get back to that way of thinking that's like, okay, well, maybe there's priorities out there that are higher than profit. Maybe there's priorities out there that are higher than my personal experience. And I think as we expand to that more and listen to like where that has cultural roots, there's so much that we can all learn from. You know, the same way that I get to learn from other Indigenous people like Cliff and Erynne here about what comes from their traditions, like anybody can learn from us in that way. And like if you want to borrow something from our culture without appropriating, like borrow caring from the land. You know what I mean? Like borrow caring for your whole community, borrow those sort of things. That's not appropriation. Like, you know, and so that to me is like what gets me stoked up, is thinking like if we can bring some more Indigenous values into the mainstream by being heard, I think that benefits all of us.
Yeah, I think it also takes the marketers and maybe the storytellers from the branding in the industry to take a chance to recognize that this sport has only been here for less than 100 years. You know, even in surfing, maybe the longest out of some of these official sports. You know, skiing maybe next, and rock climbing. I don't know the timelines, but we're talking decades. Or if we think centuries, we have some stories that have been consumed by audiences across the world for thousands of years. We've got some high quality content going on, and what better avenues to share that content than someone like Connor or Erynne. So mahalo for that. Erynne, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just one thing that kind of popped into my head is, you know, I remember the first time, Cliff, when we met, and I'm sure it would be the same with us too, Connor, when we meet in real time, like these are the types of conversations that we jump into just right away. And these are the types of the conversations that we have with our families, like at the kitchen table. You know, these are really the everyday kind of like pathways and ways of thinking that we engage with our families, and the types of conversations that really live in our communities as well. So in terms of like thinking about how to support the work that's being done and that has been done throughout generations, I think a lot of that also has to do with considering conversations that I'm participating in at my kitchen table. You know, what are the ways in which I'm engaging with my family about thinking about my relationship or our relationship to land in a way that perhaps, you know, counters certain colonial or cultural values of merit and self-interest and individualism and competition, but kind of can reclaim other values that may feel more authentic to your own practice. So if you're an outdoor enthusiast or outdoor, you know, lover, nature lover, or whatever that may be, what does that mean, right? And so there's a lot of claims over this past year where we've heard communities say, do the work. You know, we need folks to do this work as well, and to take up some of that learning practice and that educational accountability as well. And so really engaging with thinking through what is anti-racist work? What does that look like, you know, at institutional levels and educational levels? You know, because at least within the context of Canada, where I'm based in and where I'm from, you know, it's by no fault that a lot of non-Indigenous folks within Canada don't really have a complex or comprehensive understanding of Indigenous and non-Indigenous relations. Our education system has been strategic in terms of erasing our knowledge systems and understanding governance to place within education. And so a lot of the work that we're doing now is to kind of catch folks up, but we all have different roles in that. And I really think that there's a lot of room for us to start that type of learning in our homes. And sometimes that has to even start just, you know, within yourself as well. And at least for me, a lot of those real questions and a lot of that deep digging happens when I'm out on the land in any capacity. But climbing, you know, is a big part of that too. So just really seeing every space as a space for us to go a little bit deeper, I think, too.
I mean, I'm just going to echo those points to the community of outdoor adventure. You got intelligent, articulate, mindful, superficially good-looking Native people just on Car and Erynne that are great models, and there's many, many more of them out there across the planet. So by including not just their bodies but their mind and voice, I think you got an all-in-one package right here of these people who can not just shred the mountain or climb the peaks, but also represent an idea. But it's going to come at a cost, maybe, of understanding the campaign will be second to what is the laws of the land, what is the laws of the people, which may be scary for some organizations, but that might be the future to really enhance this whole thing we call sports culture or outdoor adventure culture. But I think we have time for maybe one more conversation. We have Jackie here at video request, so maybe we can bring Jackie on and have a face-to-face conversation with her. Hopefully I can get her logged on.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Jackie.
Thank you so much for accepting my request. I didn't feel like typing it out, so. But yeah, first I just want to say thank you so much for the discussion that you guys had earlier. It was so important, and it just really hit the nail on the head. I think that everything that you guys talks about, it just goes to the root of the problem with climate change, with environmental conservation. When you don't have this connectedness to the land, you don't have this inherent sense of belonging that humans need, and you don't have that responsibility to take care of everything around you. And it's because we lack that in our culture. And our organization, we are part of the 1% for the Planet Network. We're a nonprofit partner, and while exactly related to outdoor recreation, it is related to winter sports in the sense that it's becoming a fastly commercialized industry. And I'm curious how you guys can give any advice on how to insert that perspective of indigeneity into a fastly growing commercialized industry that traditionally held a culture of stewardship to the land.
Who wants to go first?
What do you think, Erynne?
Well, I mean, like I'm probably more interested in both of your responses because I think you may have more experience with that. I don't have too much experience engaging with industry at those levels. However, I've definitely participated and have listened to and have witnessed conversations around those things, and it's constantly brings up these kind of dichotomies in myself. And I think just moments where we have to kind of negotiate and consider, where do I fit into this as an individual, and what the larger kind of vision of what the purpose of the specific thing is, whether it's a marketing strategy or a campaign or whatever. And so, I mean, at least for me at this point in my life, I think, 10 years ago when I kind of started to engage with this work, I would be really comfortable as a youth, kind of just like engaging full throttle. As I get a little bit older, I definitely feel more comfortable behind the scenes, and then starting to think about how can we elevate, certain voices that may be pushed to the peripheries within these conversations. And I'm more interested in kind of participating and supporting those types of initiatives and efforts. And so, but I mean, I would love to hear what Cliff and Connor have to say, because I know that you have way more, I think, active relations with folks who are doing this work in different, spheres as well within industry.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is, like, I work really closely with Icon Pass. I work closely with Solomon, Smith, like a bunch of big corporations that are looking to change their model and looking to be more accountable. And, for me as an Indigenous person coming up in activism, a younger version of myself would have been like, oh, like, there's no compromise. We can't have, these corporate interests and have balance with the land and the people. And the more I work, the more I see that isn't true. And like, what's really most evident to me is like, where we live in United States, Canada, this Western world that's taken over Turtle Island, the culture is industry. And how are we going to make cultural change if we don't do that from within industry? And so sometimes, like, that's our most powerful tool in a way. Like, for me, one of the most empowering things this year was my experience with Icon Pass and getting to make a film with them, and how they really use that to uplift my voice. Because at the beginning of the year, I was in such a place where I felt like, do I even want a ski pass? Like, how do I feel about the way that we market these mountains? And I know these mountains as places that I love. And it took the opportunity of working with a brand that, one of their slogans is "We are the mountains." Like, for me to realize, like, okay, like if I want to reach the most people with what I have to say, this existing framework is going to be the most impactful way to do that. And the reality of making change is like, you want to shout it from the rooftops. And the easiest way to shout that from the rooftops is to climb an existing building and not to build your own from the ground up, because you have this attachment to where you're going to yell it from. And so for me, like, I just think like consistency and cultural change is the most important thing. And if you can make that pervasive in industry and you can bring in a balance of voices as you do that, and it feels right for the people who are putting themselves on the line, then that's really important. And to acknowledge that, like, as an Indigenous person working within these industries that, have a history of maybe taking from the land in a way that we wouldn't approve of, that is going to be a tender situation for us to work through and to navigate. And so as long as both sides like respect how nuanced these conversations are, I think there's a lot of room to make progress. And I think it's where we have to start.
Yeah, I fully agree with all those points. And also, as I think as athletes, we selfishly would like to say, get more of us in the community, sharing those stories and putting us out on those. It's weird to say, it's like you want to see a Native person be celebrated in a way comparable to the number one person who's the homogenous demographic. You know what I mean? We want to see that person looks like us celebrated like the best of the best. Like, that just helps us to become those athletes and adventure or whatever. But I also think it requires people like us to be, like Erynne said, behind the scenes, content creators, art directors, people actually within the institutions themselves, which have a sound mind and a clear thinking, that aren't asking the question, how do we become more inclusive? They know it in themselves, and they're the ones who are leading the campaigns. They are leading the direction of the brands. I think if we have some leadership within the outdoor adventure industry, it will allow a community to feel comfortable. There's certain people in the surf industry I really want to work with: filmers, art directors, photographers, because I'm just such a fan of the way they tell stories, and I want to align myself. If there's some people who have indigeneity in their workflow, I believe that it will then galvanize and sequester a large demographic of incredibly talented Indigenous people from wherever, whether Indigenous white people, Indigenous brown people, Asian people, whoever it is. Everyone's got that indigeneity somewhere. And if you get people leading the brand with that strong sense, they're gonna be like a magnet and pull us from the woodwork.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think I'll definitely use storytelling as a great tool to help this industry. So thank you so much. I'll leave the video.
Thank you, Jackie. With that, I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank you, everyone, for joining us in this conversation this morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Big mahalo to Connor and Erynne for taking the time and being willing to share this information with people who are so curious about it. I think that's a privilege we need to all accept. Even for myself as a Kanaka Maoli Hawaiian person, hearing these stories of the mountain, of Turtle Island, of the snow that I'm not very used to, that's it takes time, it takes energy. That's your ancestors coming to the forefront to have to educate me, and I want to do a much honor as I can with making sure that my future me's and people are going to get some of that information, and I don't want to have it in vain, like just a 20-minute conversation that I got entertained. So I mahalo both of you. I thank everyone for being here. And if there's any last things you would like to say, Erynne and Connor, please, and we'll wrap it up with that.
Yeah, just Wopila Tanka Chichalo. A big thank you to everybody involved, especially you, Erynne and Cliff, and Doksha K later and again.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Kinanasko Mitanan. I'm really grateful to be here. These are the conversations that I live for. We talk about them every day. I love you guys. It's really great to see you. And I know that this work's going to, continue on through our families and through the next generation. So I'm want to just remind you both that I'm here for both of you as well as we continue in this work together. Take care.
All right. Ahui ho. Mahalo nui.
Ciao. Hi.